all that work into creating an inventory if we don't use the items, right? Let's give a purpose to our flashlight batteries first. Right now, our flashlight is literally just us toggling our light on and off. So let's make it an actor component instead. Alright, so let's go into blueprints, blueprint components, and we've created a component for our inventory and our movement. And now we're going to make another one for our flashlight so it can easily be added to our first person character. So let's right click. And let's go to Blueprint Class. We just want to choose Actor Component right here. And we'll call it BPC Flashlight. So let's open that up. And since we'll need it pretty soon, I'm going to open up my first person character as well. So I'm going to go into Game BP, Level 1, L1 Character. So let's go back into our Blueprint Component. And we're going to need a variable of type light so that we know which light we're influencing in our character, which is our spotlight right here. We can actually rename this to flashlight if we'd like, to make it a bit clearer on ourselves. This is the light we want to be influencing. So let's go back into BPC flashlight, and we're going to create a new variable, and we're going to call it, we'll just call it light, and it'll be of type light. You can scroll down, and it's right here, light object reference. And I explained this in a previous episode, but the light variable can include all the different types of lights, such as point lights, spotlights, direction lights, etc. Since we know this is going to be a spotlight, we can change this to a spotlight, make it an object reference. If you'd like, there's no reason you would change it, as a point light or direction light would not really work for a flashlight, so we can go ahead and keep it as a spotlight if you want. I just wanted to explain both very quickly. So let's create a function. This will just be called toggle flashlight. And we can just copy and paste the toggle flashlight code from our L1 character. So if we go into our event graph, let's pull that over here, and let's go ahead and find it. So it's wherever we hit our input flashlight toggle, which is set to F. So we can just take all this code right here, copy it, and go back into our BPC flashlight toggle flashlight function and paste it. Control V. Okay. Don't know why that didn't work for a second. I probably just didn't hit Control C. Alright, so we have the same code here. We have our flashlight variable, and this is not the variable we have here. This is grayed out because our BPC flashlight doesn't know what we're referring to with this variable here, because it's a variable from our L1 character. But it asks if it's visible, and if it's true, we set the visibility to true, and if it's false, we set it to false. Now I can't remember if I mentioned this way back when we did the flashlight, but the reason we're using a branch and not just plugging this in here with a not boolean, which would just be faster, get rid of a couple nodes, is because in the future we will need two separate paths, which is why I made it like this. But we just need to replace our flashlight variable here with our new light variable here. And we can actually, I changed my mind, I want to rename this to flashlight light, so it's a bit more clear what we're working with. And we're getting an error when I compiled because it doesn't know what variable this is. And if you hold down Control and drag these and try to put it in our flashlight light, it does not actually work. Well, it will create a conversion node for the root component, but that doesn't work for this either. And the reason this variable isn't compatible is because if we click here, we search spotlight, it actually needs to be a spotlight component. The spotlight component, or any light component, references the actual light itself. So we need to change this to a spotlight component object reference, change variable type. We won't get any errors because this isn't plugged into anything. And now, if we take all these and plug it in, it works just fine. Because this flashlight variable here, in our L1 character, pulling off here, as you can see, it says flashlight spotlight component and not spotlight. So we can compile and save again. We can delete this right here. Alright, so we're going to have to expand on this a bit, but before we do, let's go ahead and add it to our L1 character. So if we just go to add component and search BPC, we now have BPC flashlight as well. Click on it, we don't need to rename it. And you can see on the right here, under default, we have this option for our flashlight light, and we need to set it to this flashlight right here. So we can do that in our initialize. So we can open the initialize function, just right here. And we'll do it right after we initialize BPC movement before the widgets, just to keep things organized. So we need to make a new initialize function for our BPC flashlight. We'll call off initialize right there. So go back into BPC flashlight, create a function. We'll call it initialize. And we can give it an input of L1 character, object reference, and we'll call this player. And off here, we'll first promote it to a variable just to have in case we need it in the future, and we'll call it player ref. And after we set that, we want to take our flashlight component, which automatically goes into our components category. So if you don't see it, just open up components here, it's right here. And we just need to set it. And we are setting it to our character's flashlight right here. So we just call off flashlight. And we could scroll down, it'll be at the bottom. And we can just get flashlight right here. And we will plug it in like that. So compile and save. Now back in L1 character, we can just call our initialize function, and our player will be self. So it'll just be the L1 character we are in right now. So now our BPC flashlight in this L1 character knows that our flashlight is this flashlight right here, and we just need a way to call the toggle flashlight function. So we'll do that by replacing our code here under our input with the new function. So we can just delete all this code after input action flashlight toggle, which is our F key, and we'll just get our flashlight right here, and we will call toggle flashlight unpressed, or you could do unreleased, whichever is more suitable to you, and we'll compile and save. And now when we hit play, everything should be pretty much the exact same, or how it appears to look in our game. So we hit F, I'm going to release the F, it goes away, release F again, it comes back. So just hitting our F key does the exact same thing it did before we started this episode, but now it runs through our component rather than our character itself. So now we can add some battery and battery levels. So we'll need 3 floats for this, as always, and it'll be max battery level, and let's make it a float. We need a current battery level and a min battery level. And this should all look familiar as we've used the exact same technique for our stamina. We can make our max battery level, let's compile so we can adjust the values. But let's make our max battery level 100. Our min can stay at 0. And let's make our current just 50 so it starts off halfway. And we'll need functions for depleting and adding to battery life. So let's make those. So we'll deplete battery life and make another one, add battery life. Let's start with add battery life. We can just make an input of amount. So let's make it a float. It'll be of type, or the name will be amount. And this is just how much battery we're adding. So we can just get our current battery level, and we need to set it first thing. And the number we're setting it to is the current battery level we already had, plus our new amount. Now we want to make sure this doesn't go above our max battery level. So we will add a clamp. So we'll search for clamp float. And we'll just put the return value in there. The min will be our min battery level. And our max will be our max battery level. And once again, this will just take this number, put it through here to make sure it does not go above our max or below our min And if it does, it just sets it to the max or the min. And we will put that to our battery level. So we can compile and save. And we could just copy all of this to our deplete battery life. Let's copy that real quick. And let's just give deplete battery life an amount input as well, also of type float. And instead of adding, we are going to subtract. So replace this with a float minus float. Put that into value. Oh, and I just realized I made a small mistake. We don't actually want the depletion of our battery life to be called with an amount in an input, since we'll be doing this incrementally over time as we use our flashlight. So let's actually remove this input. We don't need it. And for the output here, we're going to promote it to a variable, and we're going to call it depletion amount. So sorry about that, but it's all fixed now. And we're just going to set the default number of it to 1. We'll leave it at 1. So let's go back to our toggle flashlight function. And after turning on the flashlight, we want to set a timer to deplete our battery. So if it's visible, it's false, and we set the visibility to true, our flashlight's now on, we want to start depleting the battery. So we will call a set timer by function name. Another reason why we're not using an input is with the set timer, we cannot use inputs because we just type in the name here and there's no place to use the input. So set timer by function name is deplete battery life. Make sure you've spelled it exactly the same as our deplete battery life function. And we need to know our time. And this is how long to wait before executing our function. And if we set it to looping, which we want, it'll loop this, of course. So it'll wait the amount of time and then call the function again. So we want to promote this to a variable so it's easy to alter. So right click, promote to variable. We'll call it depletion speed. And we're going to set the default to 30. So every 30 seconds, this deplete battery life function will be called. And since our depletion amount is set to 1, this means every 30 seconds, 1 unit is depleted from our battery level. And the reason that might seem like it goes pretty slow is because this is the part where I warn you to make it not go too fast. Probably the most repetitive issue I see in indie horror games are flashlights that run out of battery too fast. You don't want your game to become a battery hunting simulator. A good example of this is to think of the Outlast games. And while he uses a camera and not a flashlight, it still takes quite a long time for the protagonist camera to run low on battery. This way it's easier to concentrate on the story of the game rather than stressing about your battery the entire time. You still definitely stress about batteries, but as long as you have one in your inventory, it gives you the space in your mind to worry about what's actually happening in the story. Depleting 1 unit of battery every 30 seconds will also seem fairly slow for testing it out in a level where there's no goal and there's nothing we have to concentrate on. It definitely seems shorter. But when your character's running around collecting items or running from your antagonist, etc., it will go by in the background and work a lot better like that. So that's why I chose these speeds and times. We'll also alter them just to test, because I don't want to be sitting here for a few minutes to actually make sure it's working. So when we turn off our flashlight up here, we want to stop this timer. So we'll just call clear timer by function name. And we can just copy and paste this deplete battery life. We don't have to set the objects to anything because the object is ourself. So let's reopen our deplete battery life function. And we just also want to stop the timer if we run out of battery. We don't want to keep subtracting from a battery that is completely dead. So let's call an if statement here. And we're just checking if the current battery level is less than or equal to our min battery level. If this is true, we want to turn the flashlight off and then clear the timer. So we can go into toggle flashlight, and we can just copy these two things here, Control C and Control V. And the target for set visibility is our flashlight light. And now we also want to make sure we can't turn the flashlight back on if we are out of battery. So in toggle flashlight, on the path where it turns on, before we turn it on, we just have to make sure that we have battery. So we'll create an if statement, or a branch as they call in blueprints. And we just want to make sure our current battery level is greater than min battery level. So if we have any battery at all, we can turn it on. All right, let's test it out. But before we do, I want to change the speeds a bit and create a debug so we can see how much battery we have. So in the tick, I can't remember if we still have it, tick. So let's create one, event tick, in our Elrond character. And we're just going to print string, and we're gonna print our battery life. So let's take our BPC flashlight, get our current battery level, and plug it into string. So let's open this up, and let's plug in duration to delta seconds, and this way it just won't flood the left side of our screen, and we'll just have one, because the duration only lasts 1 frame. So compile and save. And if you want, you could change the color of the text so it can differentiate from our stamina. So let's also click on our BPC flashlight here, and under default we have all these settings. Let's just change the speed to something very, very low, like 0.1, so this way it'll only take 10 seconds for our battery to completely deplete. Oh, I guess it would take 5 seconds because our current battery level is 50. So let's change our current battery level to 100 so we start with full battery. We also want to take our flashlight and let's set the default visibility to off so that it doesn't start on and it doesn't take away some of our battery there. So we'll search visible and we will uncheck this and we'll compile and save. This will work because remember when we're toggling, we toggle based off whether it's visible or not, so we don't have to update any booleans. So let's go into our level and press play. Our flashlight is off because it started. Up in the upper left we have a number right there. It says 100. It's yellow, so we know it's talking about our battery. And if we turn it on, it starts depleting, and once it reaches 0, the flashlight should turn back off. So let's see if it does that now. And it turns off. Let me try to turn it back on, and I cannot, and that's because we have no battery. If we turn it on and then turn it off again, our battery stops depleting, and we are able to turn it back on because we still have battery. So that works perfectly. So now let's add the ability to actually put new batteries in our flashlight. So we'll do this through our inventory items. So let's go into blueprints, actors, inventory, and we're going to need a player reference in our flashlight battery. If we open the inventory item up, we have this use item here, and right now it just prints a string when we use it, but we need to reference our character so we can reference our blueprint component flashlight, etc., etc. But since many of these inventory items will likely need to reference the character, we're going to do that in our inventory item master so that we can just grab it from our master instead of trying to reference it in every single inventory item. So if you open our inventory item master and we go into our begin play, we can just cast to L1 character. Object is get player character, and we will promote this to a variable, and we'll just call it player ref as always. And now if we compile and save, we can access that from our flashlight. If we just right click and, oh well, we see it right here. If you don't see it here, you might have show inherited variables turned off. This needs to be turned on to see all the variables you can access from the parent class. But either way, even if this is off, you can still reference it by searching for player ref. You just don't see it in the sidebar. But I'm gonna keep this on. So we can get our player ref, and we can get our BPC flashlight, so we can get the flashlight component from our player ref. And we want to call our add battery life function. I'm just going to delete our print string right here, so we don't need it anymore. And we just have to add an amount. I'm going to make this a variable, so it's easy to change. So I'm going to right click, promote to variable, and we'll call this battery amount. And if we compile, we can change this. I'm going to set this battery amount to 100, so every time we take a battery, it completely refills it, since that's how real-life battery works. Adding 100 is always safe, because remember, it is clamped, so it will never go above 100 in our actual battery life. So we can actually test that out now. This is how quick it is to set up the use item for any inventory item now, since we set it up in a very efficient way. So we can just hit play. Let's find one of our batteries right here. Let's pick them up. And I'm just gonna move over here where it's slightly darker to see our flashlight better. And our flashlight battery is 100 up there. We don't want to take it now because we don't want to add any battery life to a full battery. We don't want to switch it out. So we can hit F and let it deplete a little bit. So 66. And if we go into our inventory and use this item, our flashlight battery is now 100 if you look in the upper left. It has reset it to 100. And that's really how simple it is to add the use function to any one of our items in our inventory. So let's also test it with the flashlight going out and being able to turn it back on. So if we wait all the way till it goes to 0, then it should turn off. And we can't turn it back on, but if we put another battery in, we can now turn it back on. That works great. And lastly, we only want to be able to use our battery if we don't have a full battery. You don't have to do this step. You could leave it up to the player if they decide they want to switch out a perfectly fine battery with another one. But I think many people would be annoyed to see they've wasted a battery if they already have a full one. So we can just go into our inventory item flashlight. And before we add battery life, we can take our flashlight and we can get our current battery level, and we can just make sure it's less than our max battery level. So we'll also get our max battery level, and we only want to continue with this if the current battery is less than the max battery. I'll create a branch, control click to drag that over there, and off the true path we will add battery life. And we won't do anything if it's false. Actually, just realized that's not true. If it is false, we want to make sure we don't remove the item from our inventory, because it will still do that even if it goes off this false path. So we have to actually go into our master item to make a quick change, and the variable we want is going to be called use item success, and we do want it to be a boolean. And then in the flashlight battery, we can just set this boolean off the two paths. So if this is true, we successfully used our item. And if it's false, we didn't. This is a boolean we'll be able to use on any of our items, as many of them might have the possibility that we don't successfully use it. But let's actually make this boolean do something in our BPC inventory so it doesn't remove our item. So let's go to blueprints, actors, blueprints, components, and inventory. And we can just open our use item function. And let's go over to where we call use item. And remember, we call it in two separate ways. Essentially, after we use the item, we want to check if it was successful, and if it wasn't, we don't want to remove our item here. So we'll drag that out just a little bit more. And from our get actor of class right here, we can just take it from this reroute node. We just want to ask use item success, and we only want to continue if it's true. So we'll make a if statement, just create a branch, and we'll plug it in like that. If it was successful, we want to just continue, and we want to do the same thing for this use item down here. So if that was successful, and we'll have to plug this into our get actor of class right there. So only if we successfully use the item will it remove it from our inventory. And we can test that out now. by hitting play. Let's grab a flashlight. And we can see our battery life is currently at 100. And if we click here and we hit use, it was not successful, and we still have 4 batteries in our inventory. Oh, we're getting an error. Let's see what this error is right here. Oh, sorry about that. The error here is the target for the use item. We took it from this get actor of class, but we need to take it from this spawn actor, because if it comes through the not valid, this is where our reference is to our inventory item, not here. So we just need to switch it to right there, and that'll get rid of our error. And if it's false, you just do something like print a string, put the false in there as well, and we can just say use item not successful. Hit play. Let's test it one more time. Get our battery. See, our flashlight is currently at 100% battery. We try to use it, and it says use item not successful, and our stamina as well. So, and we can test it by getting rid of the battery a bit and using it now, and it works. Back to 100, try to use another, not successful. And that is how you implement using your batteries for your flashlight.